And we are live. Hi, everyone. I'm Catie Harris from Nursepreneurs, and I'm here with Jill. Say hi, Jill.
Hi, everybody.
And today on the Inner Game, we are talking about the inner critic. We all have one, and the inner critic is that little voice inside your head that just tells you can't do it, or gives you 1 million reasons why you can't do it. And maybe it's not even an inner critic, maybe it's the people around you that are telling you the things that you can't do. But we're here to squash that inner critic and talk about what we can do to get past it. Jill, what are some of your thoughts on, let's talk a little bit about what the inner critic is and how do we get rid of it or past it or something.
Yeah. So the inner critic is super tricky. It is one of the most common mindset roadblocks that we have, I think, in just across across the population, as far as just as you an individual. But certainly when you get into the business space, and nurses getting into the business space, we see this a lot because it's not in generally our comfort zone. We say, I'm not good at business. I don't know if I could do that. Like, that's inner critic. When you say these negative things, that are essentially, that's what is holding you back from taking the necessary action to go to the next step.
Yeah, and I've had this experience too, that I've talked about a little bit in terms of, for years, like a friend and I would get together and we would talk about all these great ideas, and we would like make all these plans and map out a whole thing on a napkin, and then the next day you wake up and the whole idea disappears, and it's not because it was a bad idea, it's just because I was like, well, maybe it's too much work, or somebody else will do it, or somebody else thought of it, or something, but it's a way of preventing me from even trying.
Yes. So like that's the key. And I think what people don't, there are two keys, I think, in what you just said there. There's a couple of reasons why we do that. One, it's just we're in a habit of how we identify ourselves. Like, for example, maybe you're a procrastinator. And so you constantly play this, loop of saying, oh, I'm a procrastinator. I always wait till the last minute to do this. And so what you need to, that's just an identity now that you have created for yourself, or that you're disorganized. This is another good one, especially for business, because if that's not how you identify yourself, as being an organized person, you might say, well, I don't think I could do the business thing because I'm just really not organized. And the reality is that's just what you're telling yourself. That's like you're the thinker of your thoughts. You're not actually your thoughts, right? It's just the loop that you've been telling yourself, that you are this or you are that. It doesn't mean that it's actual reality.
Right. And honestly, like I just got an email like literally at 20 minutes ago, and the nurse is saying, help, I'm overwhelmed and feeling lost, no direction. What is best for me? What do I do? And there's some inner critic in that as well, that, I'm overwhelmed and I don't know what to do. And it's very, very paralyzing. I certainly have had this issue myself where, I feel like, oh my God, there's so many things that I could do, and I can't do it, so I'm gonna just stop.
Right. So you do nothing, right? And
Yeah.
so again, like, there's the indecision. And we talked a little bit about that last week, but we see a lot of these inner game issues, these stories that we're telling ourselves, that basically it's keeping us in our safe comfort zone, right? So indecision is not really that you can't figure out what to do. That's essentially like the tip of the iceberg, right? That's just what you're willing to say, because there's no shame in saying, I am so good at so many things, I just don't know what to do. Like, I just can't decide, right? That's easy to say when, hey, what's going on? What are you working on? Well, I'm working on something. I'm not exactly sure what direction I'm going to go. That is an easy surface level explanation. What's actually happening is you're using that as a procrastination tool, and underneath the iceberg that we're not seeing is all this inner game issue of, I'm afraid I'm going to fail. I don't feel like I'm good enough. I'm not really organized, so I probably can't, put a course together. All these things that you're telling yourself, and that's actually what is causing the indecision. It's not that because there's a process for that, right? We can figure out what to do. based on, a little formula or a little bit of research, we can figure out what's best to do. It's the excuse that we're using to keep us in our comfort zone where we're nice and happy and safe.
Yeah, and I love the comfort zone because and this is something I learned about several years ago, and I've always tried to push myself out of the comfort zone. And I mean, even just the term comfort zone makes you feel comfortable, right? Like, so you're happy in that space, you're really good in it, but I don't thrive in the comfort zone, and I don't think anybody really thrives in a comfort zone. And then there's kind of like that zone that's the stretch zone. That's what we call it. So
Yes.
where you're a little bit uncomfortable, and there's different like degrees of uncomfortableness. And then the third category being kind of like the panic zone, and thinking like, for me, the panic zone was doing these lives, right? Like, I'm like, there's no way I'm doing Facebook lives because it's so like out of my comfort zone. I don't want to be there. I don't know what to say. I ramble, blah, blah. And you can stop me if I'm rambling, but you know,
I know
it was
exactly what
my,
you're saying.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
do
So
so
it was
many
my
people who are
panic
on this
zone.
call.
Right. So, but you move into, what used to be my panic zone is now more in my comfort zone. And the only way to get there is to kind of push through, and to stop telling myself, like, oh, I don't do video. I can't do video. Like, I'm no good on video. Like,
Yes.
and I've been through all of this.
Yes, and like that is such a common one we see, with nurses who are starting out. Was like, well, you want to do education, like you want to get some content out there. Like, have you made a YouTube video? And they just like they like freeze and are like, oh no, I couldn't do that. Like, no way. I would rather give up my nursing license than go on live in front of a video camera. Really? Like, but that is their panic zone. And that's what they're telling themselves is, I'm not good in front of a camera. I'm not good. They're like, oh, well, what does that mean, really? I mean, you're just sitting here. I'm just sitting in my seat in my office. I'm talking to you just because, I'm not exactly where you're located. We can't meet at the coffee shop. So we're meeting like this. So like, what is it? Do you have trouble speaking to other people? Like, can you have a conversation with someone normally? Yeah, that's not a problem. Okay. All right. So if there was a camera, rolling on you and you didn't know it, do you think that you would, is there a physical, something that would happen that you couldn't continue to speak? Well, probably if I didn't know it, it would be fine, So you have to kind of go through this process of helping them realize that really there's, like, you make decisions every day. What you put on today, like, what are you having for dinner? Like, you make decisions every single day, all day long. So it's not that you can't make decisions. You are having trouble making decisions in this area. And why is that? Let's look at that.
Yeah. And I would say, like, my inner critic was very, very, very critical for a long time. And it was paralyzing. It did prevent me from doing stuff that I wanted. And a lot of this came to ahead in terms of, like, if I want my business to move forward, I had to get past some of this inner criticism. And I did do a lot of kind of like the self-help journey in a way. And I came across a man that I worked with, and really enjoyed it because, like, we used the critical things that I kept saying to myself, and really turned it around, and just was, looked at those things and like, okay, why am I doing this? What is this protecting? What is this, preventing me from doing? And it was extremely helpful to, at least stop and put those words kind of out there, like physically keep the words separate from me. And, maybe that sounds a little woo-woo or something, but,
No.
they're just words, and how you, talk to yourself is really important. And you have to change that conversation because you're in control of what you say to yourself. And you have to know that you're doing it first and foremost, and then kind of put the kibosh on it. The mind, the words might pop into mind, but then you have the power to say, all right, well, I don't believe that. Like, I don't believe that I can't do this, or, there's somebody out there that's better than, and it's not that somebody's better than you, it's just they're different from you. And there's so many things that you could do that is your own spin and flair on it. So that's, the inner critic is just help preventing you from trying something. And it's something to be very aware of.
Yeah, it's just keeping you, and that's the thing. It's like, well, you can say, well, that's not serving you to say, that I'm really terrible at this. And so obviously I'm not going to try that. Like, how is that helping you in any way? So you can go at it like it's really not serving you to have those types of thoughts. And that's true. And it's not helping you move forward, but it's serving you in a flight or fight response, which is, like that's your RAS, right? That's your reticular activating center is saying, like, I just need to keep you safe. And so that sounds like something we're not used to doing all the time. And so I'm going to, tell you these things so I help protect you, right? But we're staying in the comfort zone where we're not growing, we're not challenging ourselves, we're not pushing ourselves, we're really not living up, to our potential. So what trick has helped me the most with inner critic, because we've all gone through this, and we still even if when you get it, like there are times where that little sneaky voice like comes right back in, and so you just have to recognize it and put it in its place, right? So like for me, it was like you spoke about disassociating that, because when I hear that I'm not good at this, like it sounds so much like me. Right? Like I just identify, it sounds like my voice. So what I've done, like my big hack for inner game is when I hear that voice, whatever it is that, oh, you're really disorganized, then I will actually imagine it being said, like if I just sucked a helium balloon, like, oh, you're really disorganized. Like it doesn't even make, like, that doesn't sound near as threatening, right? Or you can envision Mickey Mouse voice. Like the whole point is to really break really disassociate those words and that language, that loop that you've made a habit that you just constantly tell yourself over and over again until it becomes your identity, is you got to break that, right? So like that's my big hack, is that I imagine it with a helium voice, like, and
That's
then it's
awesome.
like, oh, Jill, you're so disorganized. Like, what? Like, when I listen to that, like, that doesn't even
Yeah.
make sense. Like, well, my office might be disorganized, but, I'm really organized over here and this, in my business and whatever. But like, you've got to, so whatever your hack is, whatever your method is to disassociate that from sounding like you, imagine Mickey Mouse voice or, Donald Duck or whatever, but break that habit from sounding like yourself. Okay. And
Yeah.
that's how you start reprogramming. You're breaking the habit, because when you hear it like that, it doesn't seem nearly as intimidating.
Yeah, no, that's funny. And I've actually told my son that. So my son's 8, and every once in a while he'll say stuff like, I'm stupid, I can't do the blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, Matthew, don't say that kind of stuff. Like, it's really, the words that you use are really important, and you got to
Yep.
be kind to yourself. But he's like, well, I can't stop my brain from saying it. And I said, well, you know what you do? You say, brain, shut up. You're
Yeah.
not in control. You're just an
Yeah.
organ. You're not telling me like what to think. Like, you decide what
Yes.
to think.
Yeah.
One of the,
As
go
a
ahead.
like talking about him, like telling him to shut up, like, and that's like, okay, well, I don't really, like, you have to dismiss it. Like, and I learned also, I've gotten some practice after I became a mom, because I have to dismiss my children a lot, when they're like, Mom, I really want a pony. Yeah, that's not happening, but Mom, I really want one. And here's why. And, like 3 days later, we're still in the pony conversation. You have to be that forceful. You have to be like, no, I said we're not getting a pony. You're never getting a pony. And I'm not having this conversation again. So, you have to dismiss it like you would a ridiculous request from your child, and move on, right? So do the same thing with your inner critic. You hear this, I'm really not good at business. I'm really not good at business. No, I'm not listening to that. That's a ridiculous statement. I am good at business, and I'm moving on. Like, you just dismiss it.
Right. Right. And somebody said that, in the comments, they say, I feel like my voice is annoying, so I avoid recording my first podcast episode. And I can totally relate to that, because, oh my gosh, like if you listen to my first, like, I feel like I was true to my inner critic, because in video as well as podcast is those first podcast episodes that are still up there at the very bottom of my podcast list. But, I feel like I made myself so small to kind of like give in to what the inner critic was saying, is like, you suck, you're no good, nobody's listening, nobody would ever listen to you, like those types of things.
Mm-hmm.
But the
Who are
hopefully
you?
the yeah, who are you to have a conversation with somebody. But yeah, but that comfort zone came from like, so I used to have a script for my podcast, and it was kind of like, what is your name? It was just very scripted, like, because I was afraid, I was a deer in headlights, and
Yep.
I was afraid that I wouldn't know what to ask, and I was afraid that I would run out of conversation, and I was afraid that my voice sucked, and I was afraid and afraid and afraid. But I just kept doing it. I kept scheduling the podcast episodes, and then after about like when you get to the 10th episode, you're just like, I threw the script away.
Yeah.
I stopped being critical about the voice, and I
Feels
still don't
more
like my voice,
natural.
but whatever, it doesn't matter. But
Because
it was
nobody
important.
cares really. It's about the message, right? It's about the message, and like once you just get settled in with, again, it's not about you, honey. It's about who you're serving, and you just like, okay, I don't care if my voice cracks and if I totally mess up and say something ridiculous or go blank and can't think of my next question. Like, really, I'm showing up because somebody out there needs to hear this. Like they need this help. So it makes a huge difference when you start coming from that place, because when you keep the loop going, and I'm sure, like you said, you made yourself small. Like then your brain starts looking for all the evidence to back up your claim, right? Like, because you're like, oh, I'm really not disorganized. Well, where's my mind going? My mind's going to the pile that's on the floor, and like, see, clearly you're just not disorganized, right? Like you're not organized. Like you constantly look for information to validate what that negative thought is saying, versus looking at the rest of the house that is completely clean. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's funny you say that, because I was thinking about something I read about palm reading, when they read your palm and stuff, and the person will say, you are this. And automatically what the brain does is look for examples that, verify that you are this. And you're like, oh yeah, you're right, I am that. And, like they gave the example of the same person coming back an hour later, and the palm reader said something, they said, you're organized. They're like, oh yeah, I'm organized. And the next time he's like, oh, you're disorganized. Oh, you're right, I am disorganized. And it was like
Yep.
the complete opposite of what they had just said, but it was the brain finding the evidence to support the claim that they just made. So,
Right.
and you'll do that.
Every single time. Every single
Yeah.
time, which is why you've got to, remember, you got to remind yourself, you're not your thoughts, you're the thinker of your thoughts. And so you can change what those thoughts are. Right. So, somebody, you could be super self-conscious about, what you look like in this, dress. And then you're like, ooh, I don't, I'm not sure if I should be wearing this. And then you go out and three people say, oh my gosh, I love that on you. And you're like, oh, hey, thanks. I just, just got this little number. Like you completely switch. Right. So you just have to remember that, and really disassociate that, break the pattern of that negative loop that you're kind of in.
All right. So, Jill, in terms of like a business, where does the inner critic fit in? How do we keep it quiet? But I mean, the inner critic also serves a purpose too, right? Like it prevents us from like selling our house and investing in the whole thing in Bitcoin or something, right? Like, or whatever the
Yeah.
trendy thing is.
Yeah.
There's some of that. There's definitely, it is a protective mechanism, so you don't want to dismiss it 100% of the time. But, how do we use it to kind of guide starting a business or scaling a business? And, how can we leverage it?
Yeah. So I think, one, you have to recognize its purpose, and it is all about protection. And then I would also look for, what is that? Why am I saying, like, the recognition is the key. So what is the loop? What is the critic saying about you, and how is it serving you? So you need to look at that, and because this is from day one, pre-planning business to the beginning of business to the middle of business to making your offer, to all of it. It's you always have to deal with inner critic. And so, yes, it can be protective, where you say, well, I'm going to teach something. Well, I think I will teach, what I really would like to know. I would like to learn, self-defense. Well, I'm going to teach that course. have you ever taken a self-defense course? No, I haven't. Like, so it can like guide you somewhat, but usually that's not how we use it. We usually use it to hold us back and keep us in our comfort zone and not, allow us to go through that growth. So I would challenge you to literally write down what it is your inner critic is saying. And then, like, is this reality, or is this just something that you've been telling yourself for 10 years? And then specifically go out and look for evidence that it's wrong. And if you have evidence that it's wrong, then it's that, in instances, so you're either organized or you're disorganized. You can't be both. So if you're organized in some areas and not in other areas, you can't be disorganized because you're over here really organized. So you just maybe need some new strategies for this area, right? So that completely shifts your identity of, I'm a disorganized person, I'm a disorganized person. So instead of looking for the evidence to fuel that negative loop and that inner critic, I would challenge you to write it down, recognize what those, sentences are, and then look for the evidence to prove that it's actually not true.
Yeah, and Jill, I'm going to give you 2 examples of TV shows that changed my life, and I know you're going to laugh and think it's ridiculous, but it's true. So in the early 2000s, oh God, I don't even remember. It must have been early
That was a little
2000s.
inner critic right there.
Yeah. So one of the things that I did was, oh, hold on, I gotta switch over. One of the shows that I watched that changed my life, and I know it sounds ridiculous, but it was America's Next Top Model with Tyra Banks, and I'll tell you why. Because she took these seemingly the one person I remember in particular was a Walmart cashier, and when she first came in, you're just like, oh God, like who is this person, and what who does she think she is to be America's Next Top Model? And the transformation that they did on her was like just incredible, right? So that idea that you could take like some random cashier and turn them into a model was like, it changed my perspective and how I saw things. And it was the same, like, because at the time I didn't do my hair, I didn't dress up, I didn't do anything. I'm like, why can't I find a boyfriend? Like this guy. It's like, well, maybe we could put some effort into this. But then the other show that changed my mind on things it was called Made, and it was on MTV, and it was this. I don't know if MTV is still around. That's so 80s, but anyway. What the premise was these kids that they say they wanted something like, I want to be a great surfer. So like a great surfer would come and say, all right, well, these are the 5 things that we're going to do every day to make you become a great surfer. And they drudged through it, like they wanted to be a great surfer, but they didn't want to put the effort in to become a great surfer. But the transformation of what they were able to do from like the scrawny kid to being a great surfer just by going through the motions and having help and people to help you was like amazing. So, but you saw the inner critic like constantly out there, like I can't pop up on the surfboard, I can't do this, I can't, like all these things that they couldn't. But by the end, I guess the ones that did make it, those are the episodes they showed, but it was pretty amazing. And it really did change my perspective of I can't to, I just need somebody to help me.
Yes. Yeah. And that's, it's the identity shift of you identify with these things that you can't do, or this person that you're not. And so if your business, or you want to go, start a business and you feel like those traits don't align, then that's easy to like basically just hold yourself back. And you can just sit in inactivity for months, for years of having this great idea, people who have a problem, who need help and need a solution, and you could actually be providing that, but you can't get past but I don't know anything about Facebook ads, and I don't know anything about sales funnels. Well, the reality is you didn't know how to walk when you plopped out of your mom either, like you learned it. Right. And through a lot of trial and error, you will figure it out, and pulling in mentors, people who, already have those skills, either working with them, collaborating with them, outsourcing to them, learning it, spending the time and going through the process you will get there, right? And you'll get there quicker if you pull in some mentors versus you just trying to do it out there on your own.
Yeah. All right. So I think this is a really good topic, and I'd love to hear what people think. If you want to put down in the comments some of your inner critic voices, what they're saying,
Yes.
what you want to change, or how you're able to change your inner critic voice, and some tactics that you have. We'd love to hear those.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your other people's strategies. That's my big hack is healing voice. You're so disorganized, or like it just sounds like this person is like this big, and obviously I'm not going to pay attention to that. You just have to dismiss it, like my child who wants a pony. Not happening. Moving on.
Anyway, yeah, if you guys have any topics that you want us to talk about or tackle, put those in the comments too. We will read all the comments, and we'll look forward to talking to you guys next Tuesday here on The Inner Game.
All right. We'll see you next week.